I've always believed that logic is the only true shield against the unknown. As a senior systems architect, my world is built on binary, zeros and ones, cause and effect. If a light flickers, it's a faulty capacitor. If a door creaks, it's a shifting foundation. There is no room for ghosts in a world governed by silicon. Last year, I moved into the Apex Apartments, a living laboratory of smart home integration. The crown jewel of the master suite was the iris mirror. It wasn't just glass. It was a wall-mounted biometric scanner that monitored everything from my hydration levels to the subtle fluctuations in my REM cycles. It was designed to know me better than I knew myself. For the first 6 months, it was my perfect companion. It would greet me at 6 a.m. with a soft amber glow, displaying my schedule alongside my resting heart rate. But in the 7th month, the iris began to see things that weren't in its programming. It started with the phantom pings. I'd be brushing my teeth, the fluorescent hum of the bathroom the only sound in the apartment, when the mirror's edge would pulse blue. A small notification would drift across the glass. Optimizing display for user 2. I lived alone. I had no guests. I checked the administrative logs, assuming a neighbor's device was bleeding into my local network. The logs were clean. My network was a fortress. I told myself it was a reflection glitch. Perhaps the steam from the shower was refracting the infrared sensors, tricking the AI into seeing a second person. I recalibrated the sensors 3 times. The blue pulses continued. Then the data grew specific. Every Monday morning, I would review my health dashboard. In October, a new profile appeared in the History tab. It had no name, just a string of hex code. According to the iris, this user 2 was standing in front of the mirror every night between 3:12 and 3:17 a.m. The biometrics were disturbing. This entity had a body temperature of 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Its heart rate was a steady, rhythmic 30 beats per minute. It was biologically impossible, yet the iris was recording it with clinical precision. It was as if the mirror was looking at something that lacked the warmth of life, yet possessed a pulse. On the night of October 14th, the logic finally broke. I woke up at 3:10 a.m., not to a sound, but to a feeling of intense, localized pressure, as if the air in the bedroom had been pumped out. I looked toward the bathroom. The door was ajar, and a cold, clinical light was spilling onto the hardwood floor. I didn't turn on the lights. I stayed in the doorway, my breath hitching in my throat. The iris was active. It was in full diagnostic mode, its high-resolution cameras scanning the empty air of the bathroom. On the glass, I saw the digital representation of the room. The mirror used a LiDAR-style wireframe to map the environment. In the center of the bathroom, standing exactly 3 feet from the sink, was a cluster of green lines. It was the height of a man, but the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, the joints bending at angles that defied human anatomy. The wireframe was swaying, a slow, hypnotic rock from side to side. I pulled out my phone and accessed the mirror's live diagnostic feed. On my phone screen, I saw a heat map of the room. I was a glowing orange-red silhouette in the doorway. But in front of the mirror, where the wireframe stood, there was a void. A silhouette of absolute, freezing black. The mirror pulsed. A text box appeared on the glass. User 2 is attempting to sync biometrics. Physical contact required. Please place your palm on the glass. The green wireframe turned toward me. It began to move. I lunged for the light switch. As the LED flooded the room, the mirror went dark. The bathroom was empty, but high up on the glass was a patch of frost, a perfect crystalline handprint with 6 fingers. The next morning, I received a final notification. Sync successful. User 2 has adopted your biometrics. You are no longer recognized as the primary resident. My front door won't unlock. My voice commands are ignored. I am sitting in my living room, watching the bathroom door. The iris is glowing again, and I can hear the sound of someone or something using my toothbrush. The mirror says I'm the guest now. I am a man of rituals. In my world, safety isn't a feeling, it's a series of verified actions. Every night at precisely 10:30 p.m., I perform the Loomis sweep. I check the deadbolt on the front door. I slide the heavy brass chain. I check the kitchen window locks. Finally, I arm the Guardian Pro security system. I wait for the beep, the sound of the world being shut out, and only then do I sleep. I've lived in this house for 12 years. It's a sturdy colonial build in a neighborhood where the most exciting event is usually a stray dog. But 3 weeks ago, the ritual failed. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. It wasn't a sound that woke me, it was the temperature. My bedroom was freezing. I rolled over to check the thermostat, but my eyes caught the hallway. The front door was wide open. I stood there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. The chain was hanging limp. The deadbolt was still extended, thrown into the empty air of the open doorway. The Guardian Pro panel was dark. No alarm had sounded. No notification had reached my phone. I walked to the door, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and looked out into the street. The suburban silence was absolute. Nothing moved. I closed the door, locked it again, and spent the rest of the night sitting in the kitchen with a chef's knife and a pot of coffee. The next morning, I called the security company. They ran a remote diagnostic and told me the system was perfect. No power surges, no sensor trips, no bypasses. According to their logs, the door had never been opened. But I knew what I saw. I bought a standalone, battery-operated camera, one that didn't sync to the house, and hid it on the bookshelf facing the entryway. That night I did the sweep. I locked the door, I armed the alarm, I went to bed. At 3:14 a.m., I woke up again. The cold was back. I didn't even check the hallway. I went straight to my laptop to pull the footage from the hidden camera. The video started at 10:30 p.m. I saw myself locking the door and walking upstairs. For 4 hours, the footage was a still life of my foyer. Then, at 3:12 a.m., the video began to glitch. Static lines tore across the screen. When the image cleared, I saw myself. I was standing in front of the door. I was still in my pajamas, my eyes wide and unfocused. I was sleepwalking, or so I thought. I watched as my digital self reached out and began to undo the locks. But as I watched, I realized my hands weren't moving the way they should. My fingers were twitching, snapping into positions that felt wrong. In the video, I didn't just open the door. I leaned out into the darkness and began to speak. There was no audio on the camera, but I could read my own lips. I wasn't talking to the empty street. I was inviting something in. I watched as I stepped back, holding the door wide. I waited for 10 seconds, nodding my head as if listening to a whisper. Then I closed the door, re-engaged the deadbolt, and walked back upstairs with a terrifying, vacant smile on my face. The chill in my room grew sharper. I looked at the laptop screen, rewinding the footage. I zoomed in on the doorway during those 10 seconds when the door was open. In the bottom corner of the frame, just above the welcome mat, I saw it. A shadow that didn't belong to me. It was long, thin, and had too many joints. It didn't walk into the house. It flowed in, moving past my sleepwalking body and disappearing into the hallway leading toward the basement. I froze. A soft sound drifted up from the floorboards beneath my bed. It was the sound of the basement door creaking open, and then the heavy, wet thud of something dragging itself up the stairs. I looked at the Guardian Pro panel on my bedroom wall. The light was green. The system was armed. Everything was secure. The thudding stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, clutching the laptop like a shield. Through the gap at the bottom of the door, I saw a shadow flicker, and then a voice. My own voice, but distorted as if being played through a broken speaker, whispered through the wood, "Don't worry, you did the sweep. The world is shut out, but I'm already inside." I've spent 15 years working as a night shift data analyst for a firm that handles high-security government archives. The building is a monolith of glass and concrete, 30 floors of silence and fluorescent hum. My office is on the 29th floor. The elevator ride is usually the most uneventful part of my night. But last Tuesday, the elevator did something it had never done before. It stopped at the 14th floor. On the directory in the lobby, the 14th floor doesn't exist. The buttons in the elevator skip from 13 to 15. There is no 14th floor on the floor plans, no 14th floor on the fire escape map. Yet, the doors slid open. I expected to see a wall of drywall or a dark, unfinished construction zone. Instead, I saw a hallway that looked identical to my own, except the lighting was different. It wasn't the sterile white of the rest of the building. It was a deep, bruised purple. The air that drifted into the car smelled like ozone and old parchment. Against my better judgment, I stepped out. I told myself it was a glitch in the elevator's logic, a secret maintenance level I had never been told about. The doors hissed shut behind me. The hallway was lined with doors, but they had no nameplates, only numbers written in a script I didn't recognize. As I walked, I noticed that the carpet didn't muffle my footsteps. It swallowed them. The silence was so heavy it felt physical, like a weight pressing against my eardrums. I reached the end of the hall and found a single heavy steel door with a small viewing window. I looked through it. The room inside was filled with rows of filing cabinets that stretched back into a darkness that seemed to have no end. At a desk in the center of the room sat a man. He was dressed in a suit that looked 50 years out of date. He was typing on a machine that sounded like a hail of stones on a tin roof. He didn't look up when I tapped on the glass. He didn't even blink. He just kept typing, pulling long ribbons of paper from the machine and feeding them into a shredder. I watched the shredder for a moment and realized the paper wasn't being destroyed. The ribbons of paper were coming out of the shredder intact, but the text on them had changed. It was turning into photographs. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. The photographs were of me. One showed me sitting in the elevator. Another showed me standing at this very door. The third one, the one he was holding now, showed me screaming, my hands pressed against the glass while something stood behind me in the purple-lit hallway. I spun around. The hallway was empty. But when I looked back through the window, the man was gone. The desk was empty. The filing cabinets were open, their contents spilling out like white tongues. I ran back to the elevator, my heart thundering. I hammered on the call button, my eyes darting back toward the darkness at the end of the hall. The doors finally opened and I lunged inside, hitting the button for the lobby. As the elevator descended, the digital display didn't show the numbers. It showed words. Redacting, redacting, redacting. I reached the lobby and burst out past the security desk. The guard didn't even look up. I drove home in a blur, locked my doors, and tried to sleep. The next morning I went to work. I stepped into the elevator and looked at the panel. Between the buttons for 13 and 15, there was a fresh, clean space. But when I looked at the floor, I saw something that stopped my heart. There was a single ribbon of paper lying in the corner of the elevator car. I picked it up. It was a photograph. It showed me sitting in my living room, asleep on the sofa, and standing directly behind the sofa, its long, jointed fingers reaching for my throat, was the man from the 14th floor. I looked at the back of the photo. In that same strange, unrecognized script, there was a single note. Security is an illusion. Some things are never meant to be archived. They are meant to be lived. I haven't been home since. I'm writing this from a motel room 3 towns over. But 10 minutes ago, the elevator in the hallway, a building that only has 2 floors, just chimed. I can hear the doors opening, and the air in this room, it's starting to smell like ozone